My name is Marco Rodriguez, and I never thought I'd be writing something like this. I was supposed to be Argentina's next soccer star, not a messenger warning about the end times. But after what happened to me during my previous championship match, I can't stay silent. I was clinically dead for 4 minutes. 4 minutes that changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what's beyond. I saw Jesus, and what he told me, what he showed me, about the Argentinian river turning red completely blew me away. He also showed me things that still send chills down my spine up to this day. The names disappearing from the book of life, the demons waiting in the shadows for those who reject God's mercy. I was given a second chance, but not for the reasons you might think. This isn't about me anymore. It's about what's coming, and it's coming very soon. If you're reading this, please listen. Time is running out. It was just another game day, the kind I'd experienced hundreds of times before. Nothing special, nothing different. I woke up to my dad pounding on my bedroom door, yelling that we needed to leave in 30 minutes. Championship match, college scouts in the stands. No pressure, right? I groaned, pulled my blanket over my head, and scrolled through Instagram for a few more minutes before dragging myself out of bed. Just another Saturday in Buenos Aires. I got dressed, grabbed my duffel bag with my cleats and jersey, and headed downstairs. Mom had made my pregame meal, eggs, toast, and a protein shake. She kissed my forehead and made the sign of the cross over me like she always did. I rolled my eyes when she wasn't looking. The morning was unusually cold, but I barely noticed. My mind was somewhere else. Strategy for the game, the scout from River Plate who might be watching, text messages from my girlfriend wishing me luck. If you had asked me what I was thinking about, it definitely wasn't God. I wasn't against faith or anything. Our family had been Catholic for generations. But I wasn't exactly the praying type either. Church was just something I sat through for my parents' sake. As Dad drove me to the stadium, I had no idea I was only hours away from crossing a line most people never return from. The boundary between life and death, between this world and what comes after. The stadium was electric that day. Crowds roaring, drums beating, flags waving in the stands, a sea of blue and white for our team colors. The championship match against our rivals was the biggest game of my life. Halftime came and went, and we were tied 1-1. My legs were burning, but the adrenaline kept me going. 78 minutes into the match, I received a perfect pass from Miguel, my best friend since childhood. I took off down the field, defenders chasing behind me. This was my moment, the moment scouts would remember, the moment that would secure my future. 20 yards from goal, I cut right, then left, shaking the last defender. The goal was open before me. That's when it happened. A sudden, crushing weight slammed into my chest, not from a tackle, from inside me. The stadium tilted sideways. The ball rolled away from my suddenly useless feet. I heard Miguel screaming my name, but it sounded distant, underwater. My knees hit the grass first, then my face. Pain exploded through my body, radiating from my chest to every limb. The world spun, everything blurring together in a mess of noise and motion. Faces appeared above me, coach, teammates, medics, their mouths moving in slow motion. Then silence. For a moment, I thought time had stopped. The sky above me was frozen, the people around me standing still. But something felt wrong. I wasn't in pain anymore. I wasn't even touching the ground. I looked down and saw my own body lying there on the field, still, lifeless. CPR being performed by frantic medics, Miguel on his knees sobbing, my parents pushing through the crowd onto the field. But I wasn't there anymore. I was floating above it all, watching it unfold like a scene from a movie I never wanted to see. Then I felt it, something pulling me. It wasn't gentle, it was strong, unrelenting. I was being dragged, pulled towards something I couldn't see. That was the moment I knew I was dead. Before we dive into this incredible journey, I want to encourage you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Let's create a community where we can uplift and support each other on this journey of life. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. I don't think people realize how fast life can change. 1 second I was running toward my dream, the next I was gone. No warning, no last words. Just an instant, and everything was over. The stadium, my body, my family, everything disappeared. I was floating in darkness, complete, absolute darkness that seemed to have weight and substance. The silence was crushing until it wasn't silent anymore. Whispers surrounded me, slithering through the void. Words I couldn't fully understand but instinctively knew were filled with malice. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness was getting thicker, like ink or tar, and I was sinking into it. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, almost gleeful. Then I heard something else. A voice, deep, commanding, and full of power. "Stop!" Everything froze, the darkness, the whispers, the pulling. It all stopped in an instant, and then there was light. Not just any light. This light was alive, cutting through the darkness like fire through paper. Standing in the middle of it was a figure I knew before he even spoke. Jesus. His presence was overwhelming. It wasn't just light, it was power. It filled everything, piercing through me, exposing every thought, every action, everything I had ever done. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, completely exposed before him. Then he looked at me, and I felt everything at once. Love, sorrow, disappointment. I wanted to drop to my knees to beg him for mercy, but I had no control over myself. My entire being was laid bare before him. "Marco," he said, my name sounding different when he spoke it. "Do you know why you are here?" I tried to answer, but no words came out. He didn't wait for a response. Instead, he lifted his hand, and suddenly I was seeing my life, all of it, every moment, every choice, every sin I had ever committed. It played before me like a movie, except I felt everything, every emotion, every consequence. I saw times I had hurt people, times I had ignored those in need, every lie, every selfish action, the girls I had used and discarded, the times I had cheated in school, the ways I had taken my parents' sacrifices for granted, and I felt the weight of it all. Jesus wasn't punishing me. He was showing me the truth. Then the visions changed. I saw something else, a landscape I recognized, the Rio Paraná, flowing through Argentina. But the water was changing, darkening, thickening until it ran red like blood. People stood on the banks, watching in horror as the river turned crimson. Then beyond that, I saw a world burning, people screaming, darkness spreading across the earth like a plague, and worst of all, people walking toward it willingly. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. And that's when Jesus said something I will never forget. "This is what is coming." As soon as Jesus spoke those words, the light around us faded, and I was plunged into darkness again. But this time it was different. This darkness was thick, suffocating, alive. I felt cold, but not like the chill of a winter night in Buenos Aires. This was a different kind of cold, one that sank into my bones, deeper than the body itself. A cold that wrapped around my soul and refused to let go. I wasn't alone. At first, I only sensed them, shapes in the shadows, moving just beyond my vision. Then I heard them, whispers slithering through the air. Words I couldn't fully understand, but instinctively knew were evil. Laughter, low, guttural, mocking. A voice, deep and distorted, spoke directly to me. "You don't belong here yet." I turned, trying to find the source, but there was no direction in this place. No up, no down. I was floating in an endless abyss. Then suddenly I was falling. The pit swallowed me whole. I was descending into something I had heard about in church, but never truly believed existed. Until now, because there was no denying it anymore. This was hell, and what Jesus was about to show me would change everything I thought I knew about faith, about time, and about the urgent message he was sending me back to deliver. The screams were endless, layered on top of each other, never stopping. Faces appeared in the flames, some contorted in rage, others in sorrow. I saw people I recognized. A former teammate who died in a motorcycle accident last year, a distant cousin who'd overdosed, the grandfather of a friend. Their eyes locked onto mine, pleading, but I couldn't help them. Then I heard a voice I recognized. "Marco, help me!" It was Diego, my rival from another soccer club. We'd been competing against each other since we were kids. He died 3 months ago. Car accident after a night of partying. Everyone at his funeral talked about how he was in a better place now, but he wasn't. I saw his face, saw him reaching for me, and in his eyes I saw something I will never forget. Regret. A pain so deep, so overwhelming that it swallowed every other emotion. I reached out instinctively, but something grabbed my wrist. You cannot help them now, it was Jesus. He had pulled me back, and suddenly I wasn't in the darkness anymore. I was standing in the light again, but I wasn't relieved. My body shook, and my breath came in ragged gasps. Why? I choked out. Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with sorrow. Because they chose this. I wanted to argue to say that no one would choose that kind of suffering, but deep down I knew what he meant. People reject him. They live like none of this matters, and when their time comes, it's too late. The weight of what I had just seen crushed me, and then Jesus said something even more terrifying. This is only the beginning. Even though Jesus had pulled me out of the pit, I still felt something lurking in the darkness. I wasn't safe. I could feel eyes on me, watching, waiting. It wasn't just one presence. It was many, dozens, hundreds, thousands. They hid in the shadows just beyond the light Jesus had surrounded me with. I turned my head slowly, and that's when I saw them. Figures dark, twisted, with hollow eyes that burned with a sick red glow. They weren't human. They were something else, something ancient, something evil. Demons. Their bodies flickered like smoke, shifting and distorting, but their eyes never left me. They stood in a vast circle, surrounding the light, unable to step inside. But I knew what they were waiting for. They wanted me back. I could hear their voices. Some laughed, some whispered, some mocked. Not yet, but soon. You think he'll keep you forever? You're ours, Marco. You were always ours. I wanted to cover my ears, but the voices weren't coming from outside. They were in my head, pushing into my mind, filling it with doubt, fear, and hopelessness. I looked to Jesus, desperate for answers, but his face was unreadable. Do not listen to them, he said, his voice firm, steady. But why are they here? Why do they know me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jesus looked at me with sadness in his eyes. Because every time you chose sin, they gained power over you. Every time you ignored me, they grew closer. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. I had ignored him. I had lived like none of this mattered. And now I was seeing the truth. The demons grinned. They knew that I knew, but Jesus wasn't done yet. He raised his hand and the demons shrieked, recoiling. Some vanished into the void. Others stood their ground, still watching, still waiting. You must understand, Marco, Jesus said. The battle is not just for your body, it is for your soul. Then everything changed. The darkness faded, and suddenly I was standing before something massive. It stretched endlessly in both directions, tall, golden, radiating pure light. The gates of heaven? The moment I saw them, I felt something I couldn't describe. A pull, like my very soul was being drawn toward them. It wasn't just a place, it was home. But then I saw the other side. A shadow spread across the horizon opposite the gates. It was deeper than darkness, stretching outward like a void, and from inside it, I heard the wails of countless souls. The contrast was unbearable. Light and warmth on one side, cold and suffering on the other. I turned back to Jesus, but he was already walking forward. I followed. As we approached the gates, I noticed something strange. A crowd of souls stood before them, countless people from every nation, every time period. Some walked through with peace, embraced by light. But then I saw something terrifying. Some were being pulled away. A force, invisible but unstoppable, dragged them back into the shadows. They screamed, begging, pleading, but the gates did not open. They clawed at the ground, at the air, at anything to hold on. I stepped back, shaking. Why? Jesus looked at me, his face filled with sorrow. They never truly knew me. But they're calling your name. They're praying, I protested. Jesus nodded. Many use my name, but few truly follow me. Their hearts were far from me. The gates stood firm. Those who belonged walked through with peace, Those who didn't were taken, and I couldn't do anything but watch. Jesus appeared at my side, and I couldn't bear the look in his eyes. I had known about him my whole life, the prayers my mother taught me, the crucifixes on our walls, the Sunday masses, but I had never really known him. And now here he was, standing before me, more real than anything I had ever experienced. His eyes. I will never forget his eyes. They weren't just looking at me, they were looking through me, past my words, past my excuses, straight into the deepest parts of who I was. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to be fully known. I couldn't hide. Every lie, every sin, every time I had ignored him, he saw it all. And yet his eyes were filled with love, not anger, not hatred, not disappointment. Love. Overwhelming, unconditional, all-consuming love. I couldn't handle it. I dropped to my knees, unable to speak. Jesus stepped closer, his voice gentle but filled with authority. "Marco, do you know why I brought you here?" I shook my head. I don't know." He reached out and suddenly I saw flashes, images, memories. Times when I had ignored his voice. Times when I had chosen my own way instead of his. Times when I had hurt others. When I had turned my back on him. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. "Because I love you," Jesus said, "and I do not want you to be lost." Tears streamed down my face. "But I don't deserve this. I failed so many times." Jesus smiled. "You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to follow." In that moment, I understood. It wasn't about earning my place. It was about choosing him. Jesus took a step back, and suddenly the ground beneath us shifted. The sky darkened. The air grew heavy. And then I saw it. The future. The Rio Paraná ran red with blood. Not literal blood, I realized, but a symbol. God's judgment flowing through my homeland. Fish died by the thousands, floating on the surface. The water turned toxic. People fled the riverbanks in terror. Beyond Argentina, I saw more. The earth split open. Fires raged. Storms tore across cities. I saw people running, screaming, crying out for help, but no one was listening. No one was coming. Destruction spread like a wave, covering everything in darkness. People fell to their knees, some in prayer, some in despair. And in the midst of it all, I saw those figures again. Twisted, demonic beings moving through the chaos, whispering lies, leading people further into the abyss. I turned to Jesus, my hands shaking. What? What is this?" His voice was heavy. "What is to come if they do not turn back?" Terror gripped my heart. "But people don't know. They don't understand." Jesus nodded. "That is why I am sending you back." I didn't want to go, not after what I had seen. But then Jesus said something that sent chills down my spine. "Tell them, warn them, because soon the door will close." As soon as Jesus spoke, the vision before me changed. I was no longer looking at fire and destruction. I was looking at people, regular people, living their lives as if nothing was wrong. They were laughing, eating, working, scrolling on their phones. Everything seemed normal. But then I saw what Jesus saw. Sin wasn't just around them, it was inside them. I watched as people gossiped, their words turning into dark smoke that wrapped around the ones they spoke about, suffocating them. I saw greed, men hoarding money, ignoring the cries of the poor, their hands dripping with something thick and black. I saw lust pulling people into chains without them realizing it. I saw lies slithering like snakes from people's mouths, wrapping around the ones they deceived. And worst of all, no one seemed to care. They laughed. They lived. They ignored the warnings. Then Jesus raised his hand and I saw something that made my heart stop. People were marked. Some had light radiating from them, pure and strong. But others, their foreheads were stained with darkness, an invisible seal that only I could see. The worst part? Some of them went to church every Sunday. They sang, they prayed, they listened to sermons. But their hearts were far from Jesus. Their faith was just a routine, a checklist. They thought they were saved, but they weren't. Tears filled my eyes. "Jesus, what happens to them?" His voice was firm. Unless they turn to me with their whole hearts, they will not enter my kingdom. I broke inside. I had always thought believing in God was enough, but now I understood. It's not just about knowing His name, it's about knowing Him. Suddenly the vision faded, and I saw something new. A massive book floated before me, glowing with heavenly fire. I knew what it was before Jesus even spoke. The Book of Life. The Book of Life materialized before us, its pages radiating with heavenly light. This was the book that contained the names of those who belonged to God, the ones who were saved. I held my breath as Jesus opened it. Pages turned, one after another, covered in glowing names, names of people who had surrendered their lives to Him. Some I recognized, family members, people from my church. But then I saw the blank spaces, empty spots where names should have been. People who thought they were saved, people who had been good, who had gone to church, who had believed in Jesus, but had never truly surrendered. My hands shook. Jesus, why? His voice was heavy. They never gave me their hearts. They called my name, but they never followed me. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Names fading. People who had once been faithful but turned away. People who had known the truth but chose the world instead. Their names blurred, dissolving into nothing. I couldn't breathe. Can they be saved? I asked desperately. Jesus turned to me, His eyes filled with sorrow. As long as they have breath, they have a chance. But soon the time will end. I felt sick. How many people think they are saved but aren't? How many have no idea that they're on the edge of losing their eternity? Jesus showed me one final vision. The Rio Paraná running clear again. The blood was gone, replaced by pure water. People stood on the banks, hands raised in worship, their faces radiant with light. This is also possible, Jesus said, if they turn back to me with their whole hearts. Then before I could ask anything else, everything shifted. The light around me dimmed and a strange force pulled me backward. Wait, I cried out. I don't want to leave. But it was too late. I felt my body again. The weight of it, the pain, the burning in my chest. I gasped, air rushing into my lungs like I'd been drowning. Voices screamed around me. He's back! We have a pulse. I opened my eyes, my vision blurry from tears. Bright lights, medical equipment, people hovering over me. The stadium's medical room. I had returned. But I was not the same. 4 minutes. The doctor would later tell me I was clinically dead for 4 minutes. But those 4 minutes had changed everything. The memories of what I had seen were burned into me. The faces, the screams, the book of life, Jesus' warning. I tried to sit up, but a paramedic pushed me down gently. Marco, stay still. You were gone. Your heart stopped. I looked around, desperate to tell them what had happened. But I knew no one would understand. They would just think I had a hallucination from oxygen deprivation. But I knew the truth. I had been given a second chance, not for myself, but for them. For everyone who needed to hear this before it was too late. And so as they loaded me into the ambulance, my soccer career forgotten, my old life abandoned, I made a promise to myself and to Jesus. I would tell my story. Because Jesus is real, heaven is real, hell is real, and time is running out.